I'm Carolyn Jacobs in the GBH Education Department, and the title of this session is Engaging Diverse Learners with the New U.S. History Collection on PBS LearningMedia. We are recording. We will send out the recording link along with many other links in a follow-up email that will come to you as a registrant, and you are welcome to share the links with your colleagues, of course. We are using Zoom webinar as our platform, and only the presenters have the camera and are on the mic. I wanted to start out with just this kind of helpful little list of links, because some people like to follow along as we're going with the slide deck. We're going to be concentrating on resources that you can find on pbslearningmedia.org. And the resource document, the third bullet down, has links to everything that you're going to hear about tonight, plus a lot more. So it's a very useful document. And so I hope that you're able to take them, and we'll be posting them in the chat also. Thank you to Denise Olson, who's the Director of Marketing, who is monitoring the chat. We invite you to chat with your colleagues and post questions if you'd like, and we'll do our best to get to them during the presentation. And we've also reserved some time at the end for Q&A. Many of you submitted questions ahead of time, and they were kind of grouped in categories around increasing engagement, in particular for students who are not interested in history or who don't see themselves in history. And also many of you asked for specific suggestions on teaching US history to EL students. So in both of those cases, you've come to the right place. And I think it will be obvious as we go through and show you some of the resources and the strategies that the teachers are using, how we can respond to those questions. GBH, I mentioned that I'm in the GBH Education Department, but GBH is the Boston Public Media Station and the producer of many of the iconic series that you see on your local station. For example, American Experience, Frontline, Nova, Masterpiece, etc., and lots of programs for kids. And in the Education Department, we produce resources for pre-K to 12 classrooms that are standards-based, classroom ready, and everything is free. Tonight, most of what you are going to see is available on PBS LearningMedia, and I hope that this is a familiar site to you. If it's not, please take a moment and check it out after the webinar or whenever. The platform is a collaboration, or excuse me, a co-production between GBH and PBS, and it offers thousands of resources used by millions of teachers for pre-K to 12 across the curriculum. And on the site, you will find resources such as short clips, interactives, lesson plans, documents, audio files, etc. Something for everyone, but we are very strong in social studies. Tonight, I'm thrilled to be with two women whom I've gotten a chance to know over the past couple of years. Both of them are educator ambassadors with GBH, Emily and Valerie. Emily is a high school US history teacher in an urban setting, and she teaches EL students. And Valerie is a librarian media specialist in a tech high school. And they're going to take a little time when they each speak to introduce themselves and tell you a little more. But I wanted to call attention to the fact that as educator ambassadors, they conceived of and totally planned this webinar. It was one of their tasks as an educator ambassador, and they've done a wonderful job. If you have any interest in learning more about the Educator Ambassador Program in Massachusetts, please let me know. And if you're not in Massachusetts and this intrigues you, let me know also, and I will connect you to your local PBS station, which may have a similar program or opportunities for teachers to work with them. So in the agenda tonight, I'm going to start off with a live introduction to the U.S. History Collection on PBS LearningMedia. And then Emily is going to take over and have some very specific suggestions about using resources with EL students around the Cold War. And then Valerie has taken this and run with it and is going to describe a very immersive experience that worked with her tech students, Votech students, around called a New Deal job fair. And then I'll come back on at the end for a few final remarks. All right, so the U.S. History Collection, I'm going to first start with going to PBS LearningMedia. And again, pbslearningmedia.org. I'm live on the site, and I'm just going to put U.S. History in the search bar. Now, the first thing that comes up is the U.S. History Collection, which is what I want. But I just want to point out over here on the left, you see many filters, and these filters help you fine-tune your search. We're going to go into the U.S. History Collection. All right, so the History Collection was fully launched in December of 2022. We have done lots of webinars that reference resources in the collection and the overall collection itself, and you will have links to those webinars in your in that resource document that I mentioned. The collection is organized by 16 historical eras, which should all be familiar to you as history teachers or social studies teachers. And you can also browse the collection by historical thinking skill, ranging from analyzing primary sources all the way down to developing civic understanding and engagement. And the reason for this twofold organization and searchability is because we heard from teachers that they wanted help with not only the content, but also skills. And so that's what we did. We expect that the collection will be useful to you throughout the year because it covers the entire scope of U.S. history. Each of the 16 eras is broken down into 4 or 5 subtopics, and I'm using the Gilded Age just as an example. So you can see these subtopics right here. If you are a new teacher and you want to just teach the basics of the Gilded Age, you might start with this resource right here, when I find it here, Defining the Era of the Gilded Age. So I'm going to click on that. And this is the way a resource page is typically organized, with the media here and the support materials over here on the left. But let's say, for example, you are a more experienced teacher and you may want to teach a more nuanced lesson about how African Americans were, what they were doing in the Gilded Age, what was going on with civil rights or immigration. So then you might go to this subtopic right here, race relations and immigration. And you can see where this page is just automatically gone down for you to race relations and immigration. And note over here that you can always click on for more resources. All right, I want to go back to Defining the Era, the Gilded Age resource, and point out some things to you, because this is fairly typical. This is a clip, a curated clip from an American Experience program. You can see that it's 2 minutes and 37 seconds. We know that the sweet spot for teachers are videos that are 3 to 6 minutes. So this is coming from a full-length Amex American Experience program, and we've carefully edited out short clips that can stand alone, tell a story, and are aligned to a standard. Note that the media can be downloaded. Everything is closed caption, transcripts are available, and you can slow down the video. Over here on the right are the support materials, and every resource in this collection, which has over 400, has support materials. Everyone has teaching tips, and I'll show you what they look like. Note that you can print out the teaching tips, so you can customize them. They all start with an essential question, and then they go through and the supporting questions, but then they go into activities before, during, and post viewing the media, and then extension activities. I hope you're impressed so far. All right, after the support, after the teaching tips, the background reading, well, actually, let me go to the discussion questions first, because all the resources have discussion questions and the teaching tips. And here you see 5. Typically, there are 3 to 5 discussion questions. That's not closing for some reason. There it goes. All right, the background reading, this is geared towards the student, and about 25% of the resources have background readings. And note the design of them, because a lot of thought was put into this with feedback from the students. We wanted to include images to make them visually enticing, and there is support for vocabulary, concise text, and anyway, we think we did a good job. And then I want to show you the student activity. There are about 50% of the resources have student activities. So remember, all of them have teaching tips and discussion questions. About 25% of them have the student reading, and 50% of them have this student activity. This was conceived of during COVID, with the idea that teachers needed to have assignable lessons that students could do at home. So we took that idea and we kind of ran with it. These are not designed to be totally independent. We assume that a teacher is going to be acting as a coach and introducing the lesson, but they are designed to be fairly independent student lessons. All right. So that is a typical resource in the U.S. History Collection on PBS LearningMedia. And I want to go back now and go to my next slide and point something out to you. All right, so down here I have the complete list of interactives in the collection, and there are 5 types with the URL for the full list. That is also in the resource document that you're going to get. What I just showed you in the Gilded Age is a resource that includes a short video clip. But there are many other types of resources in the collection. Interactives is the umbrella of them. But interactive maps fall into that, interactive images, interactive modules, etc. So I encourage you to, I think this list is very handy. The social studies team put it together, and I encourage you to explore the site on your own, but you're going to get a good taste of it now with Emily and Valerie. All right, I'm going to turn things over to Emily. Thank you, Emily.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here this evening to share with you this incredible resource that I implement in my classroom at least once a week, if not more often. I'm sure some of you are already diving into the site and finding the miraculous breadth of resources. Just a little bit about me. I've been teaching in the Boston Public Schools for 24 years. I teach at the English High School, which is an open enrollment public high school. It is actually America's oldest public high school. We're very proud of that. We just celebrated our 200th anniversary. And nearly all of our students are identified as high needs for one reason or another. I teach English language learners. The majority of the students at our school are English learners or former English learners. But I also teach AP, US Government and Politics. Our exam is on Monday. I don't know if there are any other AP teachers out there, but it's a busy time of year. So here in Massachusetts, we have what we call sheltered English immersion, which means that I teach mostly in English US history to students who are still learning English. So tonight, I just wanted to show you a few examples of resources that I use in my classroom. But really, good instruction is good instruction, I think we can all agree. And these are resources that you could certainly use with any group of students in front of you, but they are specifically designed with EL students in mind. I'm going to focus on the Great Depression and the New Deal. And I was so excited to pair with Valerie on this project because I think we have some really exciting things to show you this evening. Next slide, please. So first, I'll just talk a little bit about how I generally use these resources in my classroom, because there's really a range of ways you can implement the resources. Many are videos, but there are other sorts of resources such as interactive timelines. Sometimes you have video sets that kind of go well together. So you really want to ask yourself the question, how deeply am I going to implement this piece of media in a lesson? They are not standalone lessons, generally speaking. So it's something that you're going to design around. So sometimes I just want to show a quick explainer video. There are some videos like that. So that would be something very straightforward, show it from the room, talk about it, maybe a 2-minute video. But often what I'm doing is downloading the ones that are available for download. I think Denise mentioned not all of them are available for download, but many are. And when they are, I can download them and then upload them into Edpuzzle or Nearpod. I don't know if we have any Nearpod fans out there or Edpuzzle, but I find both those resources super helpful with my ELs in particular. I'm going to show you also how I use transcripts, graphic organizers, and at the end, I'll just close out by briefly discussing an interactive lesson, which would be a very intense level of implementation of a resource that students would do in a more independent fashion. Next slide, please. So back to the Great Depression and the New Deal. I'm just wrapping up, wrapping up this part of my lessons for the year. I would say unit, but I got a little abbreviated, testing. Next slide, please. So in the Massachusetts history standards, we have this whole laundry list of New Deal programs we're expected to teach. And, one of the things I love about teaching, and I think many teachers love, is just the creative challenge. How am I going to bring this content to my students while also giving them lots of opportunities to practice English in the 4 domains and kind of work my way through this list? So I think what Valerie and I have figured out is gives us an opportunity to hit most of these standards. Next slide, please. So with ELs and with all students, we really want to spend a lot of time building background knowledge. So then students have something really to chew on when it comes time to synthesize what they've learned. I love to use multiple primary and secondary sources, and I'm just going to show you a couple little tricks that I like to use. So I love to use video with open-ended questions. I really want my EL students to write as much as possible and talk as much as possible. I don't want them to feel the pressure of, do I have the right answer? I want them to extract whatever they can from a source independently or, working collaboratively with each other. So I love to choose some of the really more engaging topics. I also like to layer content. So for example, these new resources about Fannie Lou Hamer are really incredible. I use this one to teach the Great Depression, But we're going to circle back to Fannie Lou Hamer when we get to the civil rights movement. And so maybe they will remember, oh yeah, we watched something like this before. And then you're kind of doubly activating some background knowledge there. So as I mentioned, you see the little download option. There's also the transcript option. Carolyn did discuss the support materials, and I am so happy to use those support materials because they're fully adaptable. So I can open them up in a document and add in any definitions that I feel my students need. Most of my students are Spanish speaking. I might add in just a few Spanish words to guide them a little bit. But all of that is possible here in PBS LearningMedia, and I'm so grateful for that flexibility. Next slide, please. So here's an example of how I might use a transcript. Generally, I'll just take the transcript off the site, put it in a 2-column setup like you see here on the right, and then I can add questions in. Students can answer the questions while they watch the video, but that's pretty demanding. Carolyn did mention that they have closed captions, and I do play them on a slower speed. The sound quality is still great, does not sound garbled or anything like that. And then I can have the students answer the questions afterwards because they have the transcript right there. And maybe they want to toggle back and watch it independently, and that's fine too, especially if we're working in Nearpod. Next slide, please. So as we're using these different resources, I always like to have my students have some kind of container to keep their ideas and thoughts as we move along through different sources. So one thing that I use all the time, and I'm sure many of you do too, is a graphic organizer. So this is just an example, and you'll get all of these resources. Carolyn has an amazing bank of resources to share with you this evening. These are, this is a graphic organizer. It's actually 2 pages. This is just the first page, but we look at different groups. What was the experience of different groups in the Great Depression? What was the experience of different groups who benefited from the New Deal or who didn't benefit from the New Deal, which is super important to teach. And you'll see it's kind of condensed here. It's a little, the boxes are awfully small, but as students might watch, for example, we're going to see in a minute, the Fannie Lou Hamer video. It talks about the experience of children in the Great Depression. I want my students to be making notes, and again, open-ended. Well, they know that they're seeking information. What was the experience like? But I don't want them to feel like they have to answer, 10 questions with the video that are very specific. And this, I was just going to mention quickly, does reduce the cognitive demand. If they're learning English, that's taking up a lot of brain space and energy. And so you also want them to be attending to that and learning history at the same time. You want to make sure you're reducing the cognitive demand on the history end when you can. Okay, so I think we're going to watch a little clip of this.
When and where were you born?
I was born October 6th.
You born? And where were you born?
I was born 1917 in Montgomery County, October 6th.
You born on plantation?
I guess I was.
Is it not playing fully?
I'm sorry, I apologize. Things got a little confused. We're going to start over. Emily, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you're muted, but I'm going to play it and let's see what happens.
When and where were you born?
I don't have any audio.
1917 in Montgomery County, October 6th.
You born on plantation?
Can you hear it, Emily?
I guess I was.
You can. Okay, good. Thank you.
I remember one day I was playing beside this road and the landowner drove up and he asked me, could I pick cotton? And I told him I didn't know. I didn't know. At 6 years old, I just didn't know. By the time I was 13 years old, I was picking 200 and 300 pounds of cotton. I know what it's like to be hungry. I know what it's like to be without clothes. I know what it's like to be without food. I really couldn't understand what it was that made us never have enough food. We worked all the time, but we never had enough to eat. We never had a chance to go to school. So my first reaction to my parent, especially to my mother, was to raise the question to her and ask her, how come we wasn't white? My mother told me, child, you don't understand what I'm saying now, but if you get older, you'll understand. There's nothing wrong with you being black. And I don't want you to forget that. So don't be ashamed of being black. And respect yourself as a child. And as you get older, respect yourself as a black woman.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn.
I think you're, okay.
Are we okay? Yes, okay. So in that video, I wanted to show that video because that's something that you could conceivably use, as I do, in the Great Depression era, but you can also, as I mentioned, use it in the Civil Rights era. And I know many of you who teach US history might be getting ready to do that, or maybe you're in the middle of it. So you can just see, I love those videos, that particular new Fannie Lou Hamer one, because you see how it uses the color in the black and white, so it makes it feel more contemporary, that students can make connections in the modern day. Okay, and so then the students would fill in the graphic organizer. They're writing down what they learned about the African-American experience. They're writing down what they learned about children in the era. And then next, I want them to apply what they have learned. So we do quite a bit of primary source analysis. It's always a little tricky finding those accessible primary sources or English learners or struggling readers. So I have 2 letters here that we read. I have many more. They're great to go through. Asking President Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt for help, for support. And, you know, it's a great conversation to have with students. Would you write the president a letter if you needed, or an email, or some kind of message if you needed support or your family needed support? And so the students complete primary source analysis. I'm sure many of you have different tools you use for that. There are some great ones in the Library of Congress. Or you can ask, this is the time when you could ask those more direct questions when the students have the text in front of them. Next slide, please. So then after they've had the opportunity to take notes, they've evaluated different sources in text, in video, then I want them to synthesize what they've learned. And the way I do this is quite straightforward. I have the students write a letter. But what I like to do is offer up a series of images they can choose from. They choose one that evokes something in them. I lay them all out. I don't do this part digitally. I actually lay them all out in the classroom, and the students pick up and hold a particular photograph. I use some of the more common, you know, migrant mother, those ones, but also lesser known ones. I want to make sure, just like PBS LearningMedia resources show diverse perspectives, I want these photographs to show diverse perspectives. The one of the 2 children in front is actually the little boy there is Cesar Chavez. So I love telling the kids that after they do the whole assignment, and we learn about Cesar Chavez later. But I want these to be images that spur curiosity and get the students inspired to write. And then I also want them to step away from that kind of more formal writing style. We do a lot of argumentative writing, so I want them to have an opportunity to demonstrate their content knowledge with a less rigid writing structure. Next slide, please. So the students brainstorm. I have included here, I think you'll get the assignment, the photographs, and a rubric that you can use, and this graphic organizer. If you want to implement this, you should be good to go. So this is what the students do just to set up. And some of them, boy, they really get into it and they write some incredible stuff. You know, and many of them drawing on some of their own hardships in their own lives, past and present. Next slide, please. So then once they're done writing their letter, they know about the struggle that their individual character from their photograph faced. They can start to think about what would benefit these folks in the photograph. What do they really need? And then they start to learn about the New Deal. And I want them to be thinking as they do this, what programs would benefit my person, my character. And so they could watch these videos independently. I chose some that I think are the most accessible, talking about the New Deal, and they really go through a few specific programs. And I think we're going to watch a short video next.
March 4th, 1933, Roosevelt's first day in office. 14 million Americans were out of work. 9 million had lost their life savings. The economy had collapsed. Americans everywhere waited for the president to tell them what he was going to do. Roosevelt could hope that the economy would repair itself, or he could try something that had never been done before in America: intervene on a massive scale with the power of the federal government. In his first 100 days in office, Roosevelt managed to put tens of thousands of people back to work. He pledged billions to save their farms and their homes from foreclosure. He provided relief to the unemployed. He restored confidence in the banks and guaranteed the savings of millions of Americans. And to sell the centerpiece of his program, the National Recovery Administration, he orchestrated an extraordinary publicity campaign. When the 100 days were over, Roosevelt had signed 15 major bills into law and created an alphabet soup of new government agencies. "We have had our revolution," one magazine reported, "and we like it."
So I like that video because I feel like it's accessible to I teach ELD level 1 through 3 mostly. So the ones can just see the images and kind of figure out, okay, these people look like they're back to work. That's good. And then, you know, the threes, ELD 3s might be getting more about, you know, the role of the federal government and the expansion of different programs. Okay, so just to wrap up before I hand it off to Valerie, I did want to show you one other thing. Speaking of those more independent learners, a full implementation strategy that these are really just fantastic. If you have a chance to look at these just in the next couple of days, maybe over the weekend, the interactive lessons. So you can search these up on the U.S. History Collection. This one is about the New Deal and residential segregation. It guides students in sort of like almost like slide by slide fashion through a series of resources, and the students can answer questions about them in the platform. So you want the students to have accounts in PBS LearningMedia to do this, so you can review their work later. But this is a great tool for you if you have students who finish early or students who are just really invested in a particular topic. So I love to use these, and I think I will leave it at that and pass it off to Valerie.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Good evening, everyone. My name is Valerie Wadika, and I am a faculty member at Bay Path Bay Path is a regional vocational technical school located in the town of Charlton, Massachusetts. And Bay Path has feeder schools that are located around the Worcester, Massachusetts area. Our school has 23 career paths or technical programs and a little over 1,000 students that attend the high school. So it's a little bit different than Emily's, and Massachusetts vocational technical schools run a little differently than other schools across the United States. So it's an interesting concept. My role at Bay Path is library media specialist. And unlike Emily, I do not have a set class schedule. There are a great number of different aspects to my day where I can share resources such as PBS LearningMedia with faculty. And tonight, I get to share one of my favorite job aspects, and that's collaborating with staff. And if you have a library media specialist in your building, that's a great person to tap into for collaboration. When collaborating with staff, I utilize the following or focus on the following elements: differentiating teaching methods, incorporating digital tools, embracing creativity. And in a vocational technical school, this is so important, learning through hands-on experiences, because that's what we're all about. So bundling these elements results in a finished instructional lesson that's immersive and enjoyable and educational for all students. And that's what I enjoy doing the most, is having some fun, but doing and learning at the same time. So what does a collaborative work look like in the creation of, we're going to focus on the US history lesson on the New Deal. I want to share with you the steps from the brainstorming phase through the immersive learning experience. So the next few slides will explain that whole process. At the start, a good amount of planning and preparation take place. Frameworks from academic and technical areas are analyzed to see what indicators can be achieved. Materials, primary and secondary sources need to be gathered, purchases may need to be made, copies made, and everything needs to be stored on the side until that particular day that this whole immersive plan or a project is going to come out. So one thing to remember is that the initial setup for this project may be on the greater side for the number of hours that you put into it, but it's something that you can use year after year by just tweaking it a little bit. So it's all set and ready to go after your first initial phase of creation. So one of my favorite brainstorming tools is a mind map. And a mind map is great for collaborative planning. It can link documents and images in the brainstorming process. The work is stored in the cloud, and the program does have a free version. It does allow you to print out maps in PDF form. And if you need that for evidence of collaboration, it's a great way of keeping materials for your evidence binder. So this section that you're looking at is part of the collaboration process that took place for the New Deal job fair project that I'm going to be explaining in a few minutes. Okay. So through the mind map process, the New Deal job fair objective was developed. We gathered all our information, focused our thoughts, looked at the frameworks, and came up with what our students were going to be able to do or what our objective was for this particular project. So the students will be able to discuss the impact of the New Deal programs on American citizens and their responses to it during the 1930s. Okay, so the posters that you see on this page are from PBS Learning Media, and the area that they come from is called Propaganda Poster, Work on a Farm This Summer, 1943. So they are available for you to look at, and there's more than just the two of them that you see here. These are the Massachusetts Vocational Technical Frameworks from Strand 6. And just because I'm from a technical school, this is something else that I need to incorporate into my learning or my projects. So not only do I take the Massachusetts frameworks, but I also take the technical frameworks too. So I just wanted to showcase those just in case somebody's from a technical school that's in the audience. So with the objectives defined, the frameworks matched, materials organized, it's time to start on the New Deal job fair process itself. It's ready for the students to experience some hands-on learning and fun. So that's where we're going to go in our next step. Our next step is developing our groups. So we're going to do, students are grouped and are going to be researching 5 program areas. And one that I'm focusing on right here is the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, and I do believe I have a clip on the next slide on the CCC. And this is from PBS LearningMedia, Legacy of Civilian Conservation Corps in Minnesota. Do we have, oh yeah, we do.
State parks and forests, travelers still enjoy the legacy of the New Deal's most popular program, the CCC. The Civilian Conservation Corps was born from the desperate need of a country in the grips of the Great Depression.
And I am certain that on this day, my fellow Americans expect that on my induction into the presidency, I will address them with a candor and a decision which the present situation of our people impels.
The CCC was a very early work relief program. It was designed to employ young men, 18 to 25. These young men had to be eligible for relief, which meant they had to be very, very poor. The statistics themselves are a little bit frightening. Unemployment generally across the board was at about 25%. Think about 1 in 4 people being unemployed. 1/2 of young men ages 18 to 25 were unemployed, so we had 50% unemployment in that age range. And in places like the Iron Range, we were running 80% unemployment. People today talk about hard times and they describe the Depression, and I always think that's an understatement. It must have been absolutely frighteningly awful.
Just 5 days after taking office in 1933, President Roosevelt introduced a bill proposing the first of his New Deal programs, the Civilian Conservation Corps.
The bill was brought to Congress. Congress passed it on voice vote unanimously. On March 31st, it was signed into law. 3 weeks. They were paid $30 a month. 25 was sent home.
Okay, so each one of the groups, as they're working through their development stage, would be looking at videos and doing their research for a final product of a cardboard trifold on their selected organization. So this would, first we would start with a paper sample so that we wouldn't, so that the students wouldn't, I guess, make a mistake on their final trifold. So they would work, this is a sample paper as far as the information that they would need, and they would have it approved and then could work further work on their cardboard copy. So not to waste any of the limited materials. And actually what is going to happen is that these cardboard trifolds are going to be part of the final New Deal job fair. So the kids are actually working on putting the New Deal job fair together as they research and put their research on these trifolds. So next slide, please. So this is an example of a teacher trifold. So the Social Security was the one that I chose as the sample to share with the students so that they would actually see one in progress. I think this still has the tacks on it. Nothing's really glued down yet, but the Social Security was something that they could look at so they could see the final product. And as I said, there is a rubric for them to follow so that they could make sure that they are meeting the points that they needed to for the project. So after the trifolds are finished, the next step is to create a character. And I'll explain what this is going to do. You might remember this slide from Emily's presentation. She talked about the representation of people that she had for her sources for her letter writing activity. So I'm also going to develop characters, but I'm going to share with you a different way to develop characters. Next slide, please. So the way that another way to develop characters is actually using a set of dice or a die. And for each time you roll the die, it's going to represent an answer to a question or a development of the character. For instance, the first time you roll the die, you might get your age. So on the screen in front of us, or if you roll a 1, you would be between the ages of 15 and 20. Your character would be the ages 15 and 20. If you rolled a 6, your character development would be between the ages of 60 and 70. Okay, so then the next question would be, where do you live? And there'd be a list of places that you would live. And so if you rolled a number 1, you would living in a certain area, a 2, a certain area. And I think you get the idea. So other questions that you would answer would be marital status, with or without children, amount of time you have been without work, your physical health, your experience. Maybe you have farm work experience, maybe you have college experience, maybe you have factory work experience, and whether or not you were interested in relocating. So it would be a yes, a no, and maybe to a rural area or to a city. So you can see that you make up the questions to develop characters. The students take a chance, roll the dice, and that's who their character will be for this New Deal job fair. So at this point, we have our folders, which are going to be part of the job fair. We've developed characters. So now the students have taken a new role on. They're no longer themselves. They have a character development. That they're going to use this character to step into an immersive experience at the job fair. So that's the third step, the last step of this. So I actually ran a New Deal job fair a couple times, and this is one of my favorite slides because on the left-hand side is a primary source from the time period. People were signing up for Social Security. And you can see there's mostly men in this particular picture. On the right-hand side, this just was a random picture that I took during the New Deal job fair. I have a number of, it happened to be, well, I work in a tech school, so it's primarily male students, but it happened to be a number of boys, and they're signing up at the table at the New Deal job fair for some particular program. So I thought these two pictures were kind of interesting to put side by side, that we're looking at different generations, but kind of interesting to look at in one place. Next slide, please. So at the New Deal job fair, as students are walking around, they're actually looking at the products that they made in their groups. So these are posted at individual tables. And as the students are walking around in their character, they're trying to decide where they best would fit in, what program or what job or what educational program they would best fit in. So when they get to the job fair, they're going to fill out a job application, and it could be for any one of those programs that you see in the upper left-hand corner. And the questions that would be associated with the job application, you will see below the picture. They would be required to try to fill out 2 job applications. But if you were, if you wanted to diversify this requirement of 2 job applications, you could, or differentiate, I should say, differentiate this requirement. You could just have a student fill out 1 job application instead of the 2. Okay, next slide, please. So these are the educational programs that are also listed around the room, and the trifolds were again made by the students. The questions down below are questions that they would answer if they wanted to enter into one of the educational programs. So while the students are walking around the New Deal job fair, sometimes I enjoy playing a background music or background song or information for them to immerse their thoughts or themselves into. And FDR's Fireside Chat on PBS LearningMedia is one of them that I use, because this is from the time period, and it's we can listen to maybe a little recording of it. Mm-hmm. I think Carolyn has it up. Okay.
Had shown themselves either incompetent or dishonest in their handling of the people's funds. They had used the money entrusted to them in speculations and unwise loans.
He explained what his administration and Congress had done.
This bank holiday is affording us the opportunity to supply the currency necessary to meet the situation. Remember that no sound bank is a dollar worse off than it was when it closed its doors last week.
And then he spoke to them as an equal, and he said that all that we've done in Washington will mean nothing without the support of the American people.
After all, there is an element in the readjustment of our financial system more important than currency, more important than gold, and that is the confidence of the people themselves. Confidence and courage are the essentials of success in carrying out our plan. Let us unite in banishing fear. It is your problem, my friends, your problem no less than it is mine. Together, we cannot fail.
So sometimes I'll play a little background music. I have speakers up in my library, and I like the students to listen in, use their senses of hearing to immerse them into the experience. Just even the gravelly sound of the radio voice is so different than what the students listen today on their phones or on a CD. I guess maybe I'm dating myself on that one, or they download music. It's just of a different time period, and you can tell by the background noise and the sound. The other option that I have here for background information and immersion is through PBS LearningMedia, and it's American Life in the Great Depression. And this is without a video. This is just a pure audio, and it's a song that was written and played during this time. You'll hear a guitar. I think this one you'll hear a guitar, and you might hear or recognize the tune. And if Carolyn could play just a little clip of this, it'd be good.
Below, how often we traveled along with nothing to do but sing some old lazy song.
Okay, it's a background music on working in a government camp, and the words, if you have a chance, if you can go to the American Life in the Great Depression, take a listen to those home in the government camp words. It's a little sad in the sense of like, when am I going to get home? I'm trying to work, I'm trying to earn for my family, but I miss them, and it kind of goes on. So it's a interesting little song to hear. So in this immersion lesson, I try to focus on the sensory of hearing, touch, seeing, taste, and smell. I feel that if you're touching something or seeing something or tasting something, it's going to stay in your long-term memory longer. You just, it's something that you just grasp onto and can relate back to another time period. Think about when you taste something that's bitter, and it stays with you a long time, like, well, I'll never taste that again, or I remember that flavor, I remember that taste. So immersing the kids into this, with the sensory immersion into this big lesson is very important to me. So the songs, the fireside chats, hearing those station to station, touching, feeling, posters, seeing. And at the end of this particular one of the New Deal job fair, we actually had juice and donuts for the unemployed students that were working through the job fair, so that they had actually snack, which is a great bonus for any teenager. But it also gave them the reality of the, I guess, the soup lines that were experienced by many that didn't have food of that particular time. So, so that was part of the New Deal job fair too. So this evening, we packaged reading, writing, listening, and speaking, along with taste, touch, sight, sound, and smell, into the New Deal topic. We started with research and ended with an immersive lesson. We shared with you many PBS LearningMedia materials in ways to support not only the L's, as Emily shared so many of the resources, but all students. This can be shared with all students. We've engaged students in active learning in each step of the way. And this is the way that we enjoy teaching, and the way that we've collaborated to bundle all this information for you, in hopes that you too can take this away and enjoy and immerse yourself in the new job fair or this time period with your students. Emily, do you have anything you want to say to wrap up?
Yes, thank you. I'm mindful that it is just about 8 o'clock, but I did want to say that when I first saw the kind of immersive experiences Valerie was doing in her school library, I was really just blown away by how effective they would be for English learners to be able to come into an experience that requires them to use the 4 domains of language: speaking, listening, reading, and writing, and to have this hands-on experience because as Valerie mentioned, we know that kind of immersion really improves understanding and retention of what students learn. And then for me, these experiences become a reference point through the whole year. Oh, remember the time that we went to the library and we filled out those job applications, et cetera. I did also just want to address something that came up in the chat. I wish I could show you all my New Deal materials. I just picked a sampling, but I do think it's super, super important when teaching the New Deal that we do talk about issues of access and gatekeeping. And I don't use PBS LearningMedia for every move I make in the unit. And I did want to just mention that when my students are doing their sort of like discovery of the Great Depression and the experience of different groups, they're taking notes on the various experiences of different groups. And then we do return to that to talk about the New Deal. But I am now inspired to go through the PBS LearningMedia resources to find what would be a good potential resource to specifically target that issue. So thank you for raising that, Nita. I don't know, I hope I'm not pronouncing your name wrong, but thank you for raising that in the chat. And thank you everyone for being here this evening.
Wow. All right. I've been a part of the rehearsals and the planning for this, and to see it come together in such a cohesive, beautiful fashion and helpful for teachers. Thank you to both of you. Thank you very, very much. All right, I just have a couple of closing remarks. We're winding down. If you'd like to put any questions or comments you have in the chat, we will stay online until 8:15 if you'd like us to. I'm just going to go through a few closing slides and then we'll all come on camera and have a little conversation if you're up for that. This is just a reminder that your go-to spot is pbslearningmedia.org. That's where the resources that you've seen tonight live, and in particular, the U.S. History Collection on pbslearningmedia.org. Besides the U.S. History Collection and what you've seen tonight, there are many, many other collections on the site on PBS Learning Media, and we encourage you to check them out. A collection is for example, what you saw with U.S. History. It's a curated grouping of resources, and American Experience, Frontline, the Great War. These are all examples of collections on learning media that would be of interest to social studies teachers. And you have the links to all of these in the slides and also on the resource document. Oh, by the way, I was just on a call today with Ken Burns, not with Ken Burns, I wish, with teachers who work with Ken Burns. And he's working on the broadcast next year for Ken Burns is going to be on the American buffalo. And I was on a call with stations out in the West who are being tasked to write student activities and lessons drawn from the American buffalo involving their indigenous groups out in Montana in particular. It was very interesting. Anyway, heads up, that's coming next year. This is a resource on learning media that we encourage everyone to check out if you at all address civil rights, Still Seeking Justice, the known and unknown stories of civil rights figures. It's a very rich resource. And I just threw this in because it is April is National Poetry Month. And there is an interactive lesson called Women in the American Revolution on learning media. And it features Phyllis Wheatley, who was an African-American poet. And I just thought that might be of interest to some people. Please help us do better. We offer a survey. If you take the brief survey, you can download a certificate for attending. You can take the survey whether you're watching us now on the live stream or watching the recording. We do pay very close attention to your comments and welcome your feedback. And this is kind of an expanded version of the slide that we had earlier with links to the deck, the resource document, the survey, and also if you found out about this event through social media and you're not on our email list, please consider signing up so that you don't miss other events that we have coming up. I want to thank Valerie and Emily again for doing such a wonderful job. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. That is my contact information, which you have. It's on the resource document also. You are welcome to email me with any questions or comments. I'll get them to the right people.